Book 4, Chapter 2, Ashen Hills. The wine had been a mistake. Doreen's eyes cracked open to find morning light stabbing through the shutters like tiny daggers aimed directly at her skull. She was still in the armchair, her neck kinked at an angle that promised hours of suffering, and her mouth tasted like something had crawled inside and died there. The mummified goblin hand around her neck had twisted in the night, pressing uncomfortably against her collarbone. Across the room, Zira sat before the tarnished mirror in her white underskirt, a corset top hanging loose around her waist. Over her shoulders she wore a thin silk bolero, almost see-through, capped by a single billowing sleeve. Everything was white, as though even her undergarments required coordination. She drew a brush through her red hair with practiced strokes, building herself piece by piece before facing the world. Even half-dressed, the sorceress moved with that infuriating grace she always possessed, as though hangovers were something that happened to lesser mortals.
"You're awake,"
Zira observed, not turning from the mirror.
Unfortunately.
Doreen shifted in the chair, wincing as her spine protested.
How long have you been at that?
"Long enough."
The brush continued its measured journey. 93, 94.
"You snore, you know, quite loudly."
Charming. And here I thought I was being a comfort.
Doreen rubbed her temples, trying to massage away the pounding. Mr. Mouse stirred in her pocket, his tiny nose emerging to sniff the morning air before retreating again. Even the mouse seemed to judge her choices. Zira's reflection caught Doreen's eye in the mirror, the careful way she applied powder to hide the shadows beneath her eyes, the deliberate movements that spoke of long practice at constructing a mask. The sorceress's right arm was covered, the acid scars hidden beneath silk. Some wounds, Doreen knew, never truly healed. 3 sharp knocks echoed from the door.
Miss Darkmeyer.
Karma's voice carried that particular tone of formal disapproval that seemed to be his natural state.
We are gathering for breakfast downstairs shortly. We would be pleased if you could join us.
Before Zira could respond, Doreen called out, her voice pitched with deliberate mischief.
Hold your horses, Karma, we're not decent.
A moment of silence followed. Through the door, she could practically hear the wheels grinding in Karma's skull, processing, recalculating.
My apologies. I thought this was Miss Darkmeyer's room.
It is,
Doreen said cheerfully. Another pause. Then footsteps, retreating toward the stairs with perhaps a touch more speed than dignity.
"You're incorrigible,"
Zara said, but there was the ghost of a smile playing at her lips.
What did I say about my good qualities? They are plenty.
Doreen hauled herself from the chair, her joints popping in protest.
Let him wonder. Man needs something to occupy that righteous brain of his besides figuring new ways to get us all killed.
The common room of the Driftwood Tavern was filled with the smell of bacon and the low murmur of morning conversation. Karma sat at the head of the table, of course he did, with Balin hunched beside him, methodically working through a plate piled high enough for 3 men. Ilara occupied the far end, silent as shadow, picking at bread he clearly had no intention of eating. His eyes found Zira the moment she descended the stairs, tracking her with that unblinking intensity that made the sorceress choose a seat as far from the elf as the table allowed, placing Doreen between them like a buffer.
We should discuss our plans,
Karma said, ignoring whatever had transpired upstairs with the determination of a man who had decided certain things simply hadn't happened.
Supplies first. Then we head north by wagon toward the Ashen Hills.
"They're along the route to Mount Hotenow,"
Zira said, her voice carefully neutral.
Aye,
Balin spoke through a mouthful of eggs.
seen the volcano. Good weather. You can spot it from here. Big bastard.
How poetic.
Doreen signaled the barmaid for something to settle her stomach.
And what exactly do we expect to find in these Ashen Hills, besides ash, presumably?
The druid Redoth and cultists, probably. Whatever they're digging for, we stop them.
Ilara's head tilted slightly.
We protect Eli.
The words hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Zira's composure cracked for just an instant, a flicker of fear crossing her features before she smoothed it away.
We protect each other.
Doreen said quickly, cutting through the tension.
That's what a party does, yeah.
Neverwinter's market district sprawled across several blocks, a maze of stalls and shops still rebuilding from the cataclysm that had nearly destroyed the city years ago. The party had split to handle their respective needs. Karma to an armor smith, Balin trailing behind him with muttered complaints about prices. Ilara had simply remained in the common room, sitting perfectly still, watching Zira leave with those unblinking eyes. He would be there when they returned, waiting. Zira had disappeared into a clothier's shop across the square, one of those establishments with velvet curtains and disapproving attendants who charged triple for the privilege of their contempt. The sorceress owned at least 7 dresses, Doreen knew because she had counted them. A small fortune in silk and lace, and Zira still fretted over which one to wear each morning. But the acid at Thunder Tree had ruined one beyond repair, and Zira was not the sort to tolerate gaps in her arsenal. Doreen browsed the market stalls while she waited, Mr. Mouse perched on her shoulder, whiskers twitching at the smells of roasting meat and exotic spices. She examined rope at one stall, checked the balance of throwing knives at another, haggled half-heartedly over a water skin she didn't need. The comfortable rituals of someone who'd learned to look busy without drawing attention. When Zira emerged an hour later, she carried 2 wrapped parcels, one large, one small. The dress and something else. Jewelry, by the careful way she held it.
Opals.
Zira said, noticing Doreen's glance.
They match my eyes rather well, I thought.
And cost more than my entire childhood, I imagine.
One must maintain standards.
Zira tucked the smaller parcel deeper into her bag, safely hidden from the market crowds. She wasn't fool enough to wear new gems in a place like this. They walked together through the stalls, and Doreen found herself drawn to a vendor selling trinkets. Glass baubles, polished stones, bits of copper twisted into shapes that were animals, lucky charms, or sometimes nothing at all. The old woman behind the cart watched them with the patient eyes of someone who'd seen 1,000 browsers and knew which ones would buy.
You know,
Doreen said, picking up a blue glass mouse pendant that caught the light prettily.
you could have saved yourself a fortune. These are just as pretty as your opals and bring good luck as a bonus.
She turned the pendant over in her fingers, admiring it without a trace of irony. Zira's smile was tolerant.
I shall take that under advisement.
Doreen set the mouse down. Her hand drifted to another trinket, a small stone, amber gold, no bigger than her thumbnail, and stopped. Her breath caught.
This is exactly like Maldreth's gem.
Doreen shouted. The old vendor perked up.
Ah, good eye! Lucky stones, those, enchanted by a wizard in the trades ward, or so I'm told.
Where did you get this?
Doreen's voice had gone sharp.
Same place I get everything, dear. Merchant caravans. Nothing special about it.
Doreen stared at the stone. It wasn't glowing. The one in her memory had been glowing.
Maldreth had shadows.
She said quietly.
Real shadows that moved on their own. They tracked me for 3 days.
Her hand went to the mummified goblin hand at her neck.
If I hadn't got that invisibility cloak from Baravar,
She trailed off, set the stone down. Zira was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle.
Well, something kept you hidden all those years. Cloak or cleverness.
Doreen looked up, something vulnerable in her expression. Zira picked up the stone and examined it.
the fear was real.
Doreen said.
I remember running, Zai. I was so young.
I know something about fearing monsters.
Zyra's hand drifted toward her scarred arm, then stopped.
The running, that never quite stops, does it?
Not yet, anyway.
They found the others at the agreed meeting point near the temple square. Karma wore new armor, splint mail that gleamed in the afternoon light, overlapping metal strips riveted to leather, the kind of protection that turned glancing blows into bruises instead of wounds. Balin stood beside him, arms crossed, his expression sour.
1,500 gold pieces,
The dwarf grumbled.
for plate armor. Highway robbery, I call it.
The Forge of Spells, if we find it. There may be treasures there.
Karma said.
Aye, if we find it.
Balin muttered. Rolgar and their wagon waited at the city's northern gate, already hitched and ready.
All aboard, then.
Rolgar called, clicking his tongue at the horses.
Long road ahead.
The wagon wasn't large enough for all of them to ride comfortably, so they fell into a rotation, 2 or 3 in the bed at any time, the others walking alongside or ranging ahead to scout. Balin often took the reins, giving Rolgar a chance to stretch his legs or doze against the traveling chests. The first day, Doreen walked beside the wagon for a stretch, and Rolgar surprised her by actually speaking.
Drove a merchant once,
He said, apropos of nothing.
silks and spices, water deep to Luskan. Man had 21 cats.
Doreen waited for more. It didn't come.
21 cats?
She prompted.
In the wagon? With the silks?
Rolgar shook his head slowly.
Hair everywhere. Merchant didn't care. Said cats were good luck. Said they'd protected his grandfather's wagon from bandits.
Did they protect his?
Doreen leaned forward, genuinely curious. She'd heard of stranger charms working.
Bandits hit us outside Neverwinter. Cats scattered into the woods. Never saw them again. Merchant lost everything on that run. Silks, spices, coin.
Gods.
Doreen shook her head.
What happened to him?
Saved up for 2 years. Bought a new wagon, new horses. Set up the same route, Waterdeep to Luskan. Last I heard, he was heading out with 42.
Doreen opened her mouth, closed it, and looked puzzled.
Never saw them again.
The second day brought them off the main coastal road and across rolling grasslands toward Mount Hotenau. The volcano dominated the horizon, its peak wreathed in perpetual smoke, and Zyra couldn't seem to stop looking at it. When it was her turn to walk, her fingers found the focus crystal at her throat, her gaze drifting back to that distant fire again and again. She slept poorly that night. Doreen heard her stirring in the dark, caught the sounds of half-choked gasps as she fled whatever waited behind her eyes. Come morning, the sorceress was already awake, brush in hand, building herself back up one careful stroke at a time. On the third day, they reached the Ashen Hills. The landscape here was wounded. Gray soil scarred by ancient fires, hills rising like hunched shoulders beneath scrub grass that clung to life through spite alone. Ahead, in a valley between 2 rises, a mound of fresh excavation waste confirmed everything. The cult was digging. They hid the wagon and prepared to go on foot. Karma turned to Ilara.
Stay with Rolgar and guard our retreat.
Ilara held his gaze a moment longer than necessary, then nodded. Zyra didn't look at him as they left. She didn't need to. She could feel his eyes on her back until the trees swallowed her from view. The walk through the valley took the better part of an hour. They moved carefully, keeping to cover, following the depression between hills until the ground began to rise. Then Doreen saw it. At the valley's end, a wooden palisade had been erected, perhaps 3 meters high, logs sharpened to points. Thin curls of smoke rose from behind it. This was no temporary camp. The cult had built something permanent here.
Hold position,
Karma murmured.
and we need eyes inside.
Doreen was already moving. This was what she did, the sneaking, the looking. She crept forward through scrub grass, her body low, each step placed with care, born of years evading guards and merchants. And yes, wizards. The palisade loomed above her. She found a gap between logs and pressed her eye to it. Tents, half a dozen of them, clustered across the compound. Between them she picked out details, 2 watchtowers flanking a heavy gate, each manned by a robed cultist. 3 more cultists stood talking near the far wall, their voices too low to carry. Horses shifted nervously in a pen. Heavy wagons waited near the gate, transport for the excavation debris, no doubt. Near the wagons, a captive had been tied to a stake, a man in laborer's clothes, his head hanging in exhaustion, one of the excavation workers by the look of him. And at the back a dark tunnel mouth gaped open, leading into the hill itself. Then her eye found the center of the yard, and her breath stopped. A hill giant sat on bare earth, its broad back leaning against a boulder, legs sprawled out before it. It was counting its fingers, chuckling occasionally. Even sitting, the thing's head rose above the palisade walls. A single cultist stood nearby, watching it with the weary patience of a nursemaid minding a troublesome toddler. At least it's not a dragon, Doreen thought, and somehow that was what her life had become. Giants were the better option. Doreen memorized every detail, then slipped back to the group.
2 in towers, 3 across the yard, 1 with the giant, plus a prisoner.
Balin blinked.
One with the giant.
Minding it. Like a nursemaid.
Doreen shrugged.
The giant's just sitting there counting its fingers.
One with the giant.
Balin repeated, shaking his head.
Like it's a pet dog.
Karma's jaw tightened.
Tunnel?
Back of the compound, that's where they're digging.
We need a strategy.
Karma began to speak, but his words died as Zyra gasped, sharp, barely contained. Ilara stood 5 meters behind them. No one had heard him approach. He was supposed to be with Rolgar, with the wagon, safe distance away. But here he stood, having followed them through the valley in perfect silence, his eyes fixed on Zira with that terrible devotion.
We came to protect Zira,
he said softly. Zira's hand had flown to her scarred arm, pressing through the silk as though the old pain could anchor her.
We were discussing tactics.
Karma said flatly.
Sit and listen.
Ilara folded himself onto the ground, never taking his eyes from the sorceress. 2 options emerged from the hushed discussion.
Night attack,
Balin suggested.
Strike while they sleep. Ilara and I can see in the dark.
The rest of us would be stumbling blind.
Karma countered.
Not ideal.
We wait.
Zira said quietly.
At least a day. Watch them.
Karma studied her for a moment, then nodded. Hours passed. The sun crawled across the sky, shadows lengthening like grasping fingers. Doreen watched the palisade, watched Ilara watching Zira, watched Karma pretending not to watch either. Finally, Doreen's eyes caught movement within. She raised her hand. Above the palisade, they saw movement, the giant's massive shoulders and head rising as it lumbered to its feet. It moved across the compound, its upper body visible over the wooden stakes like a man wading through tall grass. A moment later, the gate groaned open. The giant emerged, hunched forward, both hands gripping the tongue of a heavy stone wagon piled high with excavation debris. It pushed the load as easily as a man might push a wheelbarrow, chuckling to itself as it trudged toward the distant debris pile.
The giant,
Balin said, his hand finding the hew axe at his side.
We take it now. One enemy, out in the open.
No!
Zira's voice was firm.
We hit the camp, while their strength is divided.
Doreen leaned back.
The fighters should decide. Your skin's on the line more than mine.
Ilara nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving Zira.
We follow Zyra.
Silence stretched between them. Balin looked to Karma, waiting for his sword brother to back him. It was the obvious choice, two warriors agreeing, as they always had, steel and stoicism, the old way. Karma's jaw tightened. He looked at Zira, that vulnerability worn like a weapon. For a moment he was back at high hold, snow falling on the battlements, believing every word from lips just as soft. He shook the memory away.
We attack the camp.
He finally said. Balin's eyebrows rose, but he said nothing. Karma turned away, his expression unreadable. 47 men. He'd learned that lesson in blood. And here he was, learning nothing, trusting a woman. Again. But Doreen caught the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand gripped Talon's hilt too tightly. She'd seen that look before, a man at war with himself.
Here's the plan.
Karma's whisper was iron.
Alara climbs the palisade, opens the gate from inside. Balin and I charge the moment it moves. Miss Darkmeyer and Doreen, you take down the watchtowers.
Zira reached into her belt pouch and produced a small glowing stone.
A sending stone. If something unexpected is inside, warn us. Doreen has its pair.
Alara accepted it, his fingers brushing hers. She flinched.
We will take care of you, Zyra.
Zira's voice emerged steady despite everything.
Magical vestment first.
She raised her hands, weaving protective magic around him. Then came the harder spell. The invisibility flowed from her fingers, washing over Alara until he simply wasn't there. The moment he vanished, terror seized her. She had just made invisible the man who days ago had been whispering to his puppet about killing her, about freeing her, about rituals and sacrifice and love that looked nothing like love. And now he was invisible, somewhere close, with a knife. The spell pulled at her concentration, demanding focus. She could feel it like a thread stretched between them, a thread she had to hold, or the magic would unravel. Her hands trembled. Her breath came shallow. Every nerve screamed that at any moment she would feel cold steel between her ribs. She could almost hear footsteps, soft, circling, coming closer. Hold the spell. Hold the spell.
Zyra.
Doreen's voice low and steady.
He's moving toward the palisade. Focus.
I know.
But her grip on the focus crystal had turned white-knuckled, and the spell wobbled in her mind like water threatening to spill. She forced herself to breathe, to hold, to not think about invisible hands reaching for her throat. Doreen positioned herself with clear sight lines to both towers. Balin and Karma crouched like coiled springs, and somewhere inside those walls, an invisible madman moved. Zyra felt her magic straining, the concentration required like holding a live coal in her palm. One slip and the spell would shatter. One moment of weakness and Alara would appear. Where? Behind her, beside her, his blade already moving. Hold, hold, hold. The gates began to move, slowly at first, then swinging wide. The watchtower cultists shouted in alarm, the doors opening by themselves, pushed by unseen hands. The gate cleared the wall, and suddenly Balin and Karma were moving, exploding from cover in a thunder of armor. Relief flooded through Zyra as her hands came up, fire blooming between her fingers. The watchtower cultist died before he understood what was happening. Zyra's fire orb caught him center mass, throwing him against the back wall. Doreen's arrow found the second watchtower guard. He folded over the railing and didn't move. At the gate, chaos erupted. The 5 remaining cultists reacted faster than expected. Their hands moved in unison, and daggers materialized from nothing, conjured steel flying toward Karma and Balin in a storm of metal. The paladin deflected 2 with his shield, but a third found his thigh. Balin grunted as a blade sliced his arm. Then the sacred flames began. Pillars of fire erupted from the cultists' hands, divine magic granted by their dragon god. The flames struck Karma's armor, forced him back. Balin raised his arms against the onslaught, roaring defiance.
Volkarath Draconim!
One cultist screamed. The words hit Zira like a physical blow. Draconic, she understood every syllable. For the glory of the dragon.
Close with them,
Doreen shouted, sprinting toward the gate.
so they can't throw fire in your faces.
Zyra felt something else in those flames, something that resonated with the fire in her own blood. Dragon fire. The cultists were channeling the essence of the beasts they served. Her scarred arm throbbed, suddenly hot, and for one terrible moment the flames called to her.
Korthax Venom Dracosar!
Another cultist raised his hands toward heaven.
Die for the Queen.
Zyra whispered, the translation spilling from her lips before she could stop it. This was holy war to them, and they would die before yielding. Then Balin made the decision. The dwarf spoke words older than mountains, his voice dropping to a rumble that came from the earth rather than his throat. Ancient runes blazed along his chest, and he began to grow. 8 feet, 10, 12. This was honest magic, not the volatile fire that burned in Zyra's veins, unpredictable and tainted with dragon blood. This was stone and blood, generations of dwarven tradition. Let Karma remember where true power lay, not in a sorceress's whispers. This was the mountain itself rising to fight. Balin charged through the gate, the Hugh axe held high. His first strike caught a cultist trying to flank him, the massive blade descending like judgment. The impact smashed the man against the palisade wall, splintering wood and bone. More runes flared. Chains of blazing iron erupted from Balin's shield, wrapping around the crushed body, binding it to the wall in a cage of fire. The cultists' screams ended in flames. The remaining cultists pressed forward, death prayer on their lips. Elara materialized behind one, blade already moving. 1, 2, 3, 4 strikes in a heartbeat, reversing his grip mid-flurry to drive down into the man's collarbone. Karma drove forward with talon gleaming. He caught a cultist mid-incantation, shield-checking him off balance. The man didn't try to flee. He drew a dagger and lunged. Karma caught the blade on his shield, holding the cultist in place. Balin's axe took him from behind, splitting him from shoulder to spine. The paladin gave the dwarf a short nod. Balin returned it. No words needed. 2 cultists remained. They didn't back toward the tunnel. They charged.
Tiamat Vorkir! Darastrix Thatzel!
The words echoed across the compound in Draconic, and Zira felt them in her blood like poison. Elara appeared beside the first, that terrible patience unchanged. His blade opened the man from hip to shoulder. The last one kept coming, dagger raised, death in his eyes. Doreen stepped through the gate, knocked an arrow, drew, released. The shaft entered through the cultist's eye and exited through his skull. He took 2 more steps before his body remembered it was dead. Doreen lowered her bow, stepping over a tangle of limbs to survey the work. Her eyes were drawn to the palisade, where Balin's runic chains had done their worst. She squinted and gave the remains a puzzled head tilt, trying to figure out what she was looking at. It was the cultist, or what was left of him. He didn't just hang there. He was fused to the wood, limbs jerky and contorted, smoke curling from the sockets where his eyes had been.
Bit much?
She asked.
Effective ancestral power,
Balin grunted, glancing at Karma. Doreen snorted and broke into a bubbling laugh that spilled out of her. The way the body twitched, a charred marionette caught in fading magic, struck a chord of humor deep in her chest. It was absurd. It was grotesque. It was perfect.
He looks like a holiday ornament,
she wheezed, wiping a tear from her eye.
just hanging there. All he needs is a...
She cut herself off. Zyra was staring at her. The sorceress wasn't looking at the body. She was looking at Doreen, her expression hovering somewhere between confusion and revulsion. The warmth drained from Doreen's face. The laughter died in her throat, strangled by a sudden, cold calculation. She straightened her spine, the mask sliding back into place.
Right, effective it is.
She turned away sharply to retrieve her arrows, forcing a cough to cover the silence. The yard fell quiet, save for the crackle of dying flames. Zira stood apart from the others, her hand pressed to her scarred arm, the cultist's final words still echoing in her mind.
Tiamat eternal. The dragon rises.
And some part of her had wanted to answer.
Cries out Penman, Lyskintan, Anna Finman, Gwythias Bryn o'r